Ah.
Welcome back to New Persuasive Words. I'm Scott Jones.
And I'm Bill Bohr.
Bill, I am brimming with excitement, okay? And you know me, I don't do excitement. I mean, I'm very
No, you don't do
even-keeled.
excitement. No, it's
Prefer no excitement. Nothing.
prefer no
Nothing.
excitement. Yeah.
Nothing today. But now it's different today. Today, we're joined by somebody that's going to be a regular contributor to the show, Emily Acrigg. She's a huge fan, a consistent fan for many episodes,
Right.
countless episodes, and we've developed
6
the
years.
parasocial relation. 6 years.
6 years. That's over half our existence. That's very good.
Exactly.
Wow.
This is unbelievable.
Wow. By the way, if you would like to do an intervention for Emily, we will send us emails afterwards.
All the podcasts out there, and she's still
it will not be like the Soprano intervention, which is my favorite episode of all time.
It's pretty great. It's pretty great. But Emily, so Emily's going to function as our ombudsman. She's going to do some stuff for us. She's going to sort through our listener mail, go to the mailbag for us. She's going to give us some editorial tips and insights. She'll come on the show every few weeks and tell us like what, where we need to tweak the game. And
that's right. Really, she's already criticized me already. And I before I met her, she was
only because I knew you could take it.
Oh, very good. I'm a fragile soul.
He is a fragile soul. So Emily, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. Give us a minute or two. Give us a little bio. Give us a little bit of a window into this fan and how'd you find the show?
Okay.
And tell us how you feel about the new role.
Okay, so I guess I became a fan because I started listening to the Mocking cast back when Scott was working on it. And then, and I think you mentioned on one of the episodes, your other podcast that you did with a friend of yours. So I went and found it. And then I was like, wow, this podcast is amazing. It's like all of this like sort of theology nerd stuff. And it was at a moment in time when I was like really struggling with the fact that like, how do I phrase this diplomatically? So many of the people who I knew and loved, who were my brothers and sisters in the faith, seemed like they were allowing their faith to be politically corrupted in a way, by like, I don't know. I don't want to alienate any of listeners, but I don't know.
First up, you're not going to fit in. You're not going to fit in.
You are a bomb in Gilead for our listeners.
Exactly.
Right
that's all we do is alienate. Usually Bill more than me, but people just get alienated. We alienate people every day.
We're seeing our ratings jump just you being here, so don't worry about that.
We love it.
Yeah. Besides, we've used many terms to categorize the people you're talking about.
Many.
I'm sure you will not go worse than we did. So
you're not going to offend
anybody. Feel free.
Yeah, well, okay, so it was really lovely to like see people who were like getting into really meaty theological issues, who clearly had a deep friendship and who also I don't know, just like really seemed to, without in any way deviating from the like sort of an orthodox understanding of Christianity. Although I'm sure that some listeners will take issue with the way I framed that, we're just like not capitulating to some of the trends in like American Christianity and getting behind some of the emerging political figures at that moment in time. I started listening in like 2018, 2019.
Golden years.
Like, yeah. And I was like going through all these like this backlog of episodes where you guys were talking about what was going on with the Trump administration, and it was just. But I appreciated that there was a balance, that it wasn't all just like a political commentary, that there was also like theological commentary as well. And I think that there's definitely an ecumenical spirit. I know that you both try to understand where many different people are coming from, so yeah. I appreciate that too about the podcast. yeah, so I don't know. I've just kept listening all these years through the peaks and the valleys, the dry spells where there were no episodes released.
The lost years.
Yeah. But I think for me, I guess the sort of like parasocial relationship really blossomed when I was in grad school recently. I just finished a master's degree in English literature, and I didn't know, I was really struggling with the way that Christianity was like perceived by my peers and professors, and I hadn't expected them to be Christian or religious. I had expected pretty much everybody to be atheist or agnostic, but there was just like a really peculiar hostility for Christianity that I just really hadn't expected, because I hadn't discovered that when I was doing my undergrad at a big public university, and I don't know. It was surprising. So I reached out in an email to Scott, and you guys were really gracious, and you responded like with an episode that I derived quite a bit of comfort from. So thank you.
I remember that episode. Yeah, that was actually a fun. Yeah, thank you for that.
It is interesting too. I think the hostility. I think one of the things that saved my Christianity coming out of fundamentalism was the closed-minded and narrow antagonism of my psychology professors. so I found like a group that were actually more closed-minded than a lot of the fundamentalism that came out of it. It actually was a good kind of balance to that. So it is a surprise. My latest, I like Robin. I like all the Robin Hoods. I've always liked that, right? So there's a Robin Hood series on MGM TV. All the streaming stuff, but it is so. I almost didn't.
Sean Bean is in
that. He's the sheriff of Nottingham, but they have the Saxons being pagan in the 12th century.
Well, yeah, that is not historically accurate.
No, and it's the good pagans are being persecuted by the bad Christian Normans. So in episode 1, the worst character so far has been the bishop, which, if anything, the Norman conquest.
I mean,
helped save Christianity in England. I know.
Right, I mean, I don't know if you have watched Braveheart recently, but apparently Edward Longshanks is a cruel pagan. But I don't know. It was sort of wild to me. Like I interact with a lot of people who seem to believe that the Irish were pagan up until the 12th century conquest of Ireland.
So I think the last week they were pagan the last week, right?
This new movie Sinners that just came out has a whole plot line about that. This vampire movie that came out very recently. It was very highly regarded.
Yeah. I think that movie is fantastic.
It is a good movie. It's a good movie, but there's this whole plot line about the Irish having been colonized and forced to convert to Christianity, and I was just it's kind of, that's definitely been true in many parts of the world, but Ireland isn't one of them. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, it's good. It's good to know.
I think one of the crises is not enough forced conversion, personally. This is why I set my eyes with some fondness on Moscow. I know. I look out there. You're just a little bit from Mecca out there.
It's nice to know that. It's nice to know that left-wing intellectuals are as ignorant of history as the right-wing MAGA folks, right? Again. So one thing they have in common is they have a very thin grasp of Western cultural history. I just watched it the other night. So, but anyway, well, welcome, Emily.
Welcome, Emily. Do you have in your first official duty, you have a little listener mail for us?
I do. Do you want me to read it?
Of course. In any dramatic voice, you would like.
Yes.
No. Okay. Dear Scott and Bill, I'm really curious about the suggestion that Christians emulate St. Boniface and, quote, cut down the sacred groves, end quote, especially in conjunction with Bill's later suggestion that Christians, quote, be more open to what the pagans have to teach us, end quote. As a neo-pagan listener to New Persuasive Words, I'm officially protesting the desecration of my ancestors' sacred places of worship. How can Christians justify such tactics in the face of a warming planet, especially if you say you are committed to pluralism? All joking aside, can you give some practical examples of what cutting down the sacred groves looks like with your reframed definition of barbarian? Sincerely, Wayland, proud member of the Iron Workers Local 86. So.
Very nice. I love that.
I love the 86. I've always loved the local 86, Phil. You know that.
Right,
You know that about me.
Right. Well, that's right. Again, I think sometimes the mythology.
By the way, the neo-pagan ironworkers, it's a huge untapped demo for us. A huge untapped demo.
We will. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the question. Yeah. Again, I wasn't advocating cutting down the entire forest, right? That's not what he did. He cut,
just trimming the hedges a bit.
Yeah. But the idea that nature religions are somehow are more environmentally sensitive, that's another kind of there's plenty of abuse of nature in all of civilization, right? Humanity, wherever it went, changed the planet, right? That's kind of matter of fact, we almost don't have horses because someone figured out before they ate the last one that, hey, maybe we can ride these things. So those were not Christians that were wiping out horses and such. So I think it's interesting. I think partially just giving an alternative voice. I mean, I did a funeral recently, and I think what I did in the funeral up here was the most explicitly Christian thing that was part of the service. The woman who died was a woman of faith.
Is this where you did Neil Diamond?
This is when we did Neil Diamond, right? And she loved Neil Diamond. That was the last. We ended out with Holly Holy, which is a great song.
I listened to that song this morning,
actually. But it's interesting too. So there's a sense where even the idea of eros, Holly Holy is a love song to a woman, but it transcends, right? Eros is baptized, if you would, and it becomes this encounter with something transcendent. And I think that's. I mean, I think that. But I did this. This is the second episode in a row I did that. So this idea of baptizing pagan truth is a Christocentric way of saying it, but it's also a way of recognizing that there's truth already there, right? So I think we can be. I think C.S. Lewis one time said once he stopped being an atheist, he could be more open-minded. So on one level, I think we can be generous to where truth is truth. And, we have talked a lot about Halich's latest book, this idea that maybe a third avenue of revelation apart from scripture and scripture to tradition and nature could also be, movements within culture, the signs of the time. So I think those things exist in paganism, but I also, let's not romanticize what they were sacrificing to those trees. Sometimes we're children, right? So I think confronting the anti-human nature of certain paganism, whether it be the paganism of early medieval Germany or the paganism of what's going on in Washington D.C. right now. I think confronting paganism where it is, meaning paganism as I think that the anti-human element in religion. Again, there's certainly plenty of anti-human element in parts of traditional Christianity, but I'm using that as a shorthand for things that I think are ultimately destructive to humanity.
I think, I agree with largely with Bill. I mean, I will say this: I think that I think John Howard Yoder somewhere it says, I think it's it might be several other people have said something similar too, but that there's always sort of a yes and a no when the faith is brought somewhere, right? There's always things that are it's sort of prevenient signs of God's redemptive work in the world, things that are already a sign that there's redemption and healing and progress going on in the culture. And there's things that are a rejection of those things. And there's things that, so the gospel is always a yes and a no in some sense. Or maybe, I don't know if the gospel is, but I like to think of the gospel as a resounding yes to humanity. It always, but there is this sense in which there are things that it confronts, right? And so that always happens. So sometimes, some sacred groves get, you need some deforestation.
Well, and I think they're also, and sometimes
cut down all the trees. That's where we're going to Venezuela. Like Boniface, we're cutting down the rainforests, okay, and the drug boats. Kill them all.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him. But I also think that there are things.
By the way, I was pretty impressed in the Mamdani Trump thing when Trump said, it's not like I've been called worse than a despot. I didn't know he knew the word despot. I was blown away. I was shocked. I was like, "Whoa!" He just used the word despot.
Well, it's in mental health test. You got cat, dog, despot.
My MRI is so strong, so powerful. All right, I mean the colors and the animals is so strong.
Because I've got impressions of Trump, I haven't ever seen that there's like a hand motion that goes with it, and a face.
There's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah, I mean, all those acting classes have really paying off.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I also think we have to be open for outside ideas to correct the paganism that creeps into Christianity, the part of Christianity that's anti-human. We've talked about this before, but I think I just lost his name. The person who the English writer, he's a novelist. You're doing his book in book club about the argument. Bufford, but Bufford talks about original sins. By the way, if you're looking for Light Perpetual is a great novel to give for Christmas. His book, I think, is a brilliant novel. I think how Christianity deals with sex and bodies and things. I think that's part that I think there's a lot that we have learned from modern psychology and things like that are correctives. I think what Christianity talked about with the asceticism in the 2nd century was very different than what it becomes like in the 5th and 6th century, and particularly this kind of anti-body, thing. I think in many ways, so much of Christian piety failed to appreciate the incarnation, and sometimes even a lot of people who really did understand the incarnation in brilliant ways, like the Franciscans and Francis, they still didn't, they didn't necessarily apply it to their body as they should have. So I think there's a sense where Christianity.
My asceticism is very limited. Just no rice, no pasta right now. I'm like I've cut a lot of carbs.
Emily, you've cut
a lot of carbs.
We're gonna get a lot of this with him right now.
Cut a lot of carbs, a lot of push-ups,
we're gonna hear this all the time now. So anyway, but thank you, listener, for that.
Thank you for that beautiful, and thank you for reading it beautifully. All right, let's get into our topic for today. Today we're going to talk. Before I get to it, though, I was going to read a news story about the Pope and a warning he had. But I always look for news stories sometimes before I record, and I did see. Speaking of asceticism and weight loss, that former adult film star Jenna Jameson shared before and after Chasing Jesus weight loss photos. So former adult film star, and Jenna Jameson, in the adult film world, I'm not a huge connoisseur, but she's an A-lister. I mean, you'd have to call her an A-lister.
You probably just should move on.
I'm just saying, for our listeners that don't know, I don't know, the guys at the Iron Workers thing might know it, but she credits her dramatic weight loss to her journey of finding Jesus. On Sunday, Jameson shared side-by-side close-up shots of her face, showing that she is now healed after dedicating her life to her faith. Chasing Jesus and conquering fear, I've come a long way in the last few years, and I am so excited to see where my faith takes me. Jameson captioned her post. There were, of course, lots of responses to it, and she does look great. And I will say, I got this from Fox News, so foxnews.com. So look, if it works for Jenna Jameson, who couldn't it work for? A little chasing Jesus, burning the calories, cutting the carbs. Hey, it's we're into holistic ministry here, friends.
Very good.
See people thrive.
All right. Well, getting back to our Pope story. Well, last week was a historic moment where the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Pope prayed together or recited the Nicene Creed at the site of the Nicene Council. There, yeah, last week in Turkey.
He did, and he looked fantastic. Actually, he was in some sense, I thought, like the most shabbily dressed prelate. I thought the Eastern guys looked a little better than he did. I mean, he didn't look bad, but yeah, just my own.
Well, he's on their turf.
That's true.
It was a home game. It was an away game for him.
Exactly. He was away uniform. So, he said he would in the context just before he went to Nicaea. He issued a warning about the heresies confronted by the council, whose 1700th anniversary he was about to celebrate just hours later. And he said that these things are reappearing. Says there's also another challenge, which we might call a new Arianism, present in today's culture, and sometimes even among believers. This occurs when Jesus is admired on a merely human level, perhaps even with religious respect, yet not truly regarded as the living and true God among us. And so he also talked about the importance of faith being expressed in contextually in relevant language, just like it was in Nicaea. But that's interesting. So that was in my ear, that idea, and also in my thinking was something that I recently heard in Ross Douthat's podcast, which is excellent, by the way. If you guys are not listening to this, it's called Interesting Times, and it's just a long-form conversational podcast, and he is having some really, really interesting people on the show.
I read the transcript of the alien lady. Yeah, he had like.
I didn't listen to that one yet.
It was really.
I
good.
think a lot of us. So in it, he's talking about he's talking with Yoram with Yoram. I always get this name wrong. Yoram Hazony, who is Jewish. He lives in Israel now, but he's a pretty famous conservative scholar. He's the father of this National Conservative Conference, which is in America, and he's a scholar of conservative stuff, and he writes a lot about nationalism. And in it, they're talking in the beginning about this nationalism that's emerging on the right and its connection to anti-Semitism. And Douthat says, let's talk about, they talk about Nick Fuentes, and they're kind of framing the conversation. And Douthat says, let's talk about who we're talking about beyond the specific media figures and influencers. My friend Rod Dreher got, let's say, a lot of attention for quoting someone telling him that 30 to 40% of younger Republicans working in politics in Washington, D.C., like Nick Fuentes. I have a little skepticism of that statistic. The fact that half of Republican Capitol Hill staffers are women, I think alone should give you some reason to be skeptical. But do you see this as a phenomenon of younger conservatives and right-wingers? Do you see it as a phenomenon of an audience that wasn't anti-Semitic being activated or drawn in a particular direction? What are we talking about in the scale of interest in anti-Semitism? And then they talk about this emerging kind of anti-Semitism on the right. They talk about the differences between, the Marxist anti-Semitism, Marxist anti-Semitism among mainstream liberals in that tradition, and anti-Semitism that's emerging in this new nationalism. So, Bill, I thought, wow, we could play on words. Aryanism and Arianism, right? Aryanism, the new Aryans, the white Aryans, the old Aryans, the North African kind, the kind that would say we don't like to talk to them because they're not white. I mean, Bill, what do you make of this, Bill? Is there any connection between this emerging Arianism that theologically that the Pope points out, and this sort of Aryan/white nationalism that is becoming the talk everywhere, because and especially now that Tucker Carlson did this kind of romantic, I can only call it a romantic conversation with Nick Fuentes, and Nick Fuentes was on his best beer. I mean, that he could have used a salad fork, and that Nick Fuentes was really refined. It's like there were finger bowls out and things like that. What do you think, Bill?
Well, obviously, other than, I mean, they're homonyms, right? We talked about that.
I
You and
love a nice homonym.
Yeah. Uh, except I think, and again, the first, the Nicene Creed didn't get ratified until Nicaea, Constantinople, some 70 years later. And I think a lot of people at their first Nicene wasn't really sure what was going on, and they weren't really sure what they came up with afterwards. Like many church gatherings I've been at over
That's
over
like
my
when Peter
lifetime.
when Peter Lightheart asked somebody, "How does it feel to be part of the radical orthodoxy movement?" And the guy, I think it was Bill Cavanaugh, says, "Movement. I thought it was a book series."
Right. Those of us and trying to read Milbank, you're glad it was a limited book series.
Exactly.
Yes. Now, I think though, one way to look at the original Arian controversy in the 4th century, was what does it mean to be human? In other words, using whatever you say about Jesus, your Christology is actually really tied into how you think we should live. It's not just how we should be saved, but what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to be human in relationship to God? And I think what was wrong with Arianism, particularly as it got developed, um, is this idea of we need Christ to be more like us, because to be more human than God, because to be a Christian is at some levels to be an overachiever. In other words, there's a sense where, I think the early Aryans were really interested in soteriology. They weren't, they get accused of being philosophers. The late Aryans were.
This is my advocacy of mediocrity, Bill. I'm fighting heresy. I do not want. I'm allergic to overachieving. This is why I try to keep my activity limited.
But I do think, so it's not. Again, we should be healthy. We should work out. But you and I joke. But it is not accidental that there is a physique, that there is a female face, right, or female plastic surgery enhanced body type, right, that goes along with, I think, the current heresy that has captured a lot of the right in American Christianity. And I think there's a sense where there's the superhuman, right? Now that's not what the early Aryans were about, but their name, the homonym, the late Aryans, the Aryans of the Nazi regime, and also some of what we see in this kind of nationalism, it's this it's an idolatry of the human physique, whether it be a racial ideology, racial identity that never really existed, the mythology of the National Socialist in Germany, or if it's the mythology that's being embraced by large segments of certain populations in this country, of what it means to be a real man. What's the place of a real woman? I think all of this is related to, a faulty idealization of what it means to be human. And I think that's what Athanasius and later on the Cappadocians were saying no to in Arian and then the Neo-Arian movement.
I think about this sense that and you find this, when Barth preaches his famous sermon in the 30s in Germany about how Jesus, the emphasis on Christmas Eve, and Jesus taking Jewish flesh, and the sense that what the basically is it who said that the job of every Christian is to take. I think this is Rosenzweig, maybe he's quoting somebody or paraphrasing somebody. He said that it's the job of the Christian to take the God of Israel to the world, and it's the job of the Jew to convert the inner pagan in every Christian, right? And that if you lose the Hebrew Bible, you just float off into these nether places, into these idealized weird types and things. But this is something that Hazoni says to Douthat. They're talking about this. Douthat is basically saying that there's a lot of these younger folks in DC don't know Jews. And he says, and Douthat says, why not? And he says, because the entire Trump movement, MAGA, the NatCon, the entire thing is itself a rebellion against established elites. So if you were being brought up in the Old Testament, in the old, I'm sorry, that's Freudian here, in the old established elites in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, it was just kind of normal that all those people went on AIPAC trips or Federation trips to Israel. And you got a lot of contact with Jewish members of the coalition, and it was normal. There's new elites in town. The right has thousands of young people. Hundreds of them have gone into the administration, and they are new to a lot of things. One of the things that they're new to is sitting around and talking to religious Jews or nationalist Jews. That's interesting, right? That part of, and they talk about how this lack of just contact on the ground with Jews leads to abstraction. It leads to a misunderstanding of the Hebrew Bible. It leads to these old tropes where the Hebrew Bible, even among these so-called conservatives, where the Hebrew Bible is looked at as parochial and God is it's kind of weird, the Marcionism that's now infiltrating the right.
All right, or the supersession, or the way the typical supersessionism that happens in most Christian preaching of some form or the other. Emily, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, since you are coming out of some of the same places these people who are these young Turks who are in Washington.
Yeah,
Emily, speak for the young people. Speak as a young person. Tell us what the kids are into these days.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to mischaracterize anyone, but it seems like a lot of the sort of like MAGA online right, there's a sense of grievance, and it's often like a sense of like we sort of deserve to be in some kind of place that we like have been shut out from, or we've lost out on something. And I sort of think that like that's very like that sort of attitude is very like antithetical to like what I think is like the sort of like Talmudic contribution to like the scholarly world, which is just this sort of like elevation of like the argument as like an art form, and like the inclusion of like the minority voice. And I think especially if you're like sort of like you said, sort of eschewing these like sort of more established institutions, just like either you think that they're corrupt and or you didn't get into Harvard and you only got into Harvard Extension School or whatever. I think that there would be maybe anyone who's seen like they were coming from like a more open sort of like intellectual place you might sort of be distrustful of it. I don't know, that's maybe being overly charitable to this group of people.
Well, no, I get, it's interesting. I think for instance, there are people that, Scott and I know who have just a visceral reaction to Democrats in general and liberals in particular. And, it's statistical. The majority of Jewish voters are progressive. My entire Jewish family, they're all progressive, right? They're progressive in their thinking. And I think not that it's beyond I disagree. You can say it both ways. I disagree. You don't get to just disagree with liberals or conservatives anymore. You have to demonize the other. So if you think all Democrats are evil, you think all liberals are libertards, then you've just put about 75% of Jews in that category. And I think that's part of what goes on with some of this younger right-wing anti-Semitism. The younger liberal anti-Semitism we've talked about, that's a different animal, but I think that's where it comes from in part.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you say like, so one of the things Hazoni talked about again was like how there's these different kinds of Marxist anti-Semitism and liberal anti-Semitism, and again this what he's seeing in his own nationalist part of the conservative movement. But it's interesting when you think about because Douthit was like, well, where do you see it in the liberal tradition? And he just went right to the Enlightenment problem with the Hebrew Bible. That whether it's Kant or Hegel or whatever, that's just this problem with particularity, this idea for universalism and a kind of abstract reason, and talking about how they could finagle the New Testament a little bit, right? You can
Right.
moralize and
Right.
abstract the New Testament. I mean, look at what Kant does, right? I mean, what kinds of, well, the atonement, I mean, that's just saying that you
Right.
really get forgiveness if you're really sincerely sorry. That's what it really means. Or these things like, but it's just harder to do that with the Hebrew Bible, right? Because it's so particular, and it's and this is why the Marcionitism is always there, right? I mean, because it's because
Well,
as you're saying, this draw to the abstraction of humanity, right? It's just much easier to do it if you just have the New Testament and just have the Marcionite parts of it, you know, in
Right.
upstate New York or something.
Right. Well, I also, yeah, right. And I think, I mean, late modernity is shaped, what are the holy trinity of late modernity? Darwin, Marx, and Freud. Well, Marx and Freud's own, it's hard not to see self-loathing in their own Jewish, in their own Jewish heritage, right? And so, I think that's baked into a lot of late modernity. It's almost by osmosis. Marx's and Freud's issue with their own Jewish heritage gets passed down to those who come after them. I mean, periodically the Jews in the Soviet Union, they support the revolution and just randomly, lots of people get purged, but they get purged. As one of the last group of people Stalin enjoyed killing were Jewish writers in the Soviet Union. In the
And I love how you said one of the last groups. Stalin, you saved the best for last. One of so many groups that Stalin enjoys killing.
Right?
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like when Sacha Baron Cohen has this Israeli character, the special forces character, and he's interviewing Dick Cheney, and he says, "I mean, I know you created so many wars, but." Which is your favorite? It's like, I know, I never thought of that. Then he asked him to sign his waterboarding kit. Then Dick Cheney's kind of elated. He gets a little twinkle in his eye. He gets to sign a water.
That's right. There we go.
Do you have a favorite war?
Yeah, it's I don't know what's harder this time. The fact that Dick Cheney becomes a warrior for democracy at the end of his life. That's
what we're
I don't know.
celebrating
There's so many difficult. There's so many hard things to deal with in this modern in 20.
Yeah, next
in the
we're going to be
20s.
yearning for people. We're going to be like, oh my gosh, remember the good old days of Darth Vader?
Darth Vader.
Or that was
He was such a good guy. He was so. And Hannibal Lecter, my good friend Hannibal Lecter.
Exactly. Yeah, Trump likes Hannibal Lecter. Well, yeah. So I don't know, but I think that particularity, right? I mean that is the scandal of particularity, right? And I think that the Arianisms, the theological Arianism, and the racial new Aryans. I mean, this is a struggle, right? with a certain relationship between the particular and the universal. Because on one level, you could say the new Aryans like particularity, but with the eschew of any universalism, right? Christian particularity leads to the ultimate universalism. But you could look at sort of the Fuentes or the new sort of white nationalist types as it's almost like an ultra tribalism, right? Like America's just for these kinds of people, and Italy's for those kinds of people, and we'd all be better off if it's the particularity, but there's not a scandal to it, right? There's not this scandalous revelation that through the particularity it becomes this ultimate universalizing compassion and truth. It's the worst kind of particularity, right? That the best we can do is sort of protect our tribe, and that's sort of and live a benign version of The Walking Dead,
right? Which is totally contrary to the Hebrew Christian Bible, right? Because you're called to care for the stranger 20 times more in the Hebrew scriptures than you are to love your neighbor, and that the incarnation is the ultimate powerless stranger comes to us, right? So there's a sense where a lot of heresies, and I think we have to be careful using old, historical events in the church in contemporary settings. I think that can be problematic because
I don't think I've ever been careful about.
All right. Well, every generation is quite good at producing.
I'd say sometimes I'm downright cavalier.
Right. We do throw Pelagius around a little too free. Yeah. And you use Lutheranism as a compliment. as opposed to how
Of course, it's
yeah,
fantastic.
as opposed to I use it as a problem. But
You can call me Lutheran all the way to heaven.
Problem all the way to problem to be theologically corrected by the Bible, Luther. But
never let the Bible stand in the way of good theology. That's what
never let Paul stand in the way of Luther, right?
Spoken like a fan, not a follower.
Right.
Exactly.
But
I mean,
anyway,
Bill, we all need people to correct us, right? And sometimes Paul needed a corrective in Luther.
It still comes down to did is God revealed in powerlessness or in power? Is a theology of glory? We hear, and I will agree with Brother Luther on this, or is a theology of the cross?
Amen.
Yeah, and I think almost all errors historically. This was the problem with Pelagius as well. To be honest with you, I mean, everyone thinks it's one of the great exercises of progressivism, modern theology is to talk about Pelagius really is the hero and evil, bad Augustine. But if you stop and look at what Pelagius's ideal Christian was, it was an elite that only a few can achieve. And it was not, and the common person, average person doesn't have a chance to achieve what Pelagius's vision of what ideal Christianity was. Whereas Augustine saw faith as, a person who does the best they can each week and needs to confess their sins, receive the sacrament, and put their life in the hands of a gracious God, as opposed to one of the superheroes of the faith. And I think this desire to it's just a different version of Genesis 3, right? I think it always is. It's always either envy or pride. And sometimes you put a little bit in your cocktail and you have a lovely original sin cocktail when you put both of them.
Oh, there you go, folks. For your holiday party, that spills, have that in your holiday party.
You have your pride as your base drink, but you make sure you put some envy bitters in there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's an accent. It's an accent. And shake it. Don't stir it.
All right.
Shake it.
Well, before we end, we have to give an update on the fantasy football league that was inspired by this show. We're expanding. Emily's going to be like our new Robin Quivers, like for the
absolutely.
I know, it's awesome. And so I just want to give the playoff back. So the playoffs have come for the many of these are fans of the show, listeners. And so I just want to give you the playoff.
Some of them fans of Jesus.
Some of them fans of Jesus. A few of them are followers, and some wonderful sons of Israel as well. We are an inclusive fantasy football league. But all right, here are the playoffs. Playoffs starts this week. The number 1 seed goes to our good friend Dustin Sonder. The only Anabaptist in the group is
my
the
man
number
from college.
Neighbors is the number 1 seed, and he will be playing the number 8 seed, a friend of the show, Ben DeHart, who we're going to come to his church.
Wow.
I know. So an Anglican and an Anabaptist walk into a bar together. All right.
Now, in a war, I would always bet on the Anglican.
Yeah, right. All right. This number 2 seed is going to be our own Mark Boyd from First Presbyterian Church in Huntington, West Virginia, going against his team is Sola Defensio against Organized Sinners. Drew Ludwig, Presbyterian minister in Buffalo, 2 of my former students, 2 former media guys, and who are doing great work. The number 3 seed is going the Predators, the Reverend Steve Longley, who's up here in Vermont, going against Noah's Mesheveniks, which is Cantor Scott Buckner from Vermont as well. So he's the 6th seed. And then Sacrificial Lambs, Mark Blank, our good friend who was at our live show.
Great guy.
Will be playing me, Occam's Razors, in the 4th and 5th seeds. So there, and the other guys are in the consolation bracket, which we like to call the toilet bowl. They'll be playing for that. But nonetheless, that is where our fantasy. So next week, we'll give you the winners of the first round of the playoffs in our first ever New Persuasive Words Fantasy Football League.
Love it. It's fantastic.
Very good.
Emily, thank you so much for
thank you, Emily.
Willing
meeting you face to face
to do this for us with us, and it will be folks should be back in a few weeks for more listener mail, for more editorial criticism, insights, ideas.
And by the way, feel free to send Emily hate mail now as well.
Please,
you don't just have to send me the hate emails.
Exactly.
Give some to Emily as well, because she would enjoy
about
that.
Bill. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
All right.
And the beat goes on. Amazing.